Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic.
What claims are just not backed by the historical facts? There has never been a Viking helmet found that had a horn attached to it. A war hasn't been fought this badly since Olaf the Hairy, High Chief of all the Vikings, accidentally ordered 80,000 battle helmets with the horns on the inside. Captain Edmund Blackadder, when little Timmy bought a hat, its horns attached within, he cried aloud, "Well, fancy that," and gave the cap a grin. A genius design. Quote, he spoke, "To spy its innards full, I'll be the talk of other folk. With this atop my skull, I simply can't resist," quote, he said, with simple-minded pride, and slammed the hat down on his head. And Timmy fucking died. From what I heard, it was archaeology mistake. Drinking horns being buried next to helmed warriors. Blame Wagner, or really his costume designer. Costume designer Carl-Emil Derpler, who included horned helmets in his gorgeous costume designs for the 1876 performance of Wagner's classic Norse saga, Der Ring des Nibelungen. The gorgeous designs are available here, and it's easy to see why they quickly became iconic. The opera was so influential that Vikings with horned helmets became a new standard, despite the fact that they were mythical. Source: https://www.vox.com/29/115265668/vikings-horned-helmets. That ancient people thought the earth was flat. We have records from around 430 BC where Greek philosophers spoke of the earth being a sphere. In 240 BC, the Greek astronomer Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth and was only about 2% out. There are modern people who think the earth is flat and they can read. They can read. Not very well, though. I'm sick of curriculum materials teaching my fourth graders that the Spanish discovered Florida when they were looking for the Fountain of Youth. That lie was developed in the 1920s as a tourist gimmick. There's literally nothing in the historical record that supports it. Ponce de lying. Tallahassee. Half true. Ponce de Leon trying to find the Fountain of Youth is a myth. But it was first mentioned shortly after he died in the 1500s. This is usually attached to Florida because it was the first place in the contiguous U.S. that Ponce de Leon claimed discovered. The myth was a thing throughout the Age of Discovery. This was then repopularized in the 1900s to encourage people to visit Florida. To add on to this, the tourist attraction that is now the Fountain of Youth ended up being a valuable archaeological site. The Timucuans once had a small village on the site. Marilyn Monroe never said, "If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best." There is literally no documented proof she ever said that. True. She actually said, "If you can't handle me at my diddliest, you don't deserve me at my doodliest." Avoid girls that say this. One of my friends changed it to, "If you can't handle me at my worst, then buckle up buttercup because my best ain't that great." Rolling on the floor laughing. Corsets were not typically tight-laced. They were only tight-laced by the highly fashionable women, and usually only for particular events or portraits. Corsets were designed to be comfortable. Women wore a cotton layer underneath the corset, so it didn't rub against the skin. The corset was more like a bra, but instead of using the shoulders to support it, used the whole torso. Some people claim they are much more comfortable than modern brass. The intense proportions of the past were achieved with corsets and padding. Tight lacing was uncommon, but layers of petticoats or hoops or bum rolls or whatever else at the time was very common to give women the trendy body shape at the time. The intense proportions of the past were achieved with corsets and padding. Especially the padding, the bum rolls, the bosom enhancers, the panniers, the ruching and ruffles and fluffy lace, and the carefully padded out armhole area so the bust line was smoothly rounded, and the padded up neck area so the shoulders sloped with feminine grace. It's not dressmaking, it's structural engineering. My great-grandmother was broomstick scrawny, judging from her everyday clothing, but dressed in her 1880s best. She had the best shape that money could buy. Watched a video once of the process of adorning the more formal and high-class corset outfit. It took over like 45 minutes of non-stop work with an assistant. There's like 20 layers to a formal corset. Blew my mind. Also, most of the photos of tiny waists from that time were doctored. We were doing that way before Photoshop. Something that cracked me up. My mother has old portrait photos from approximately 100 years ago of family from the old country, with where they're hung. As the light hits them, you can see some beard hairs shining differently, because they were added with pencil to fill out the beard so it would look better. As someone with a larger bust, I definitely prefer corsets and stays to brass. Victorian tight lacing is like models wearing ballet boots modernly. I'd imagine that a corset is more like attaching a snug but comfortable boob shelf to your torso, rather than how a bra is more like a tight titty hammock that weighs down on your shoulders and back with the straps. Would this be accurate? Removed. People need to understand where our knowledge comes from. We're unique in the animal kingdom because we have complex language and writing that enables us to be born with practically zero understanding of the world. but learn from others and build on humanity's knowledge. When they do tests on other primates and us, we excel on social learning. They're better than us in lots of other cognitive skills, like pattern recognition and memorization. The key to us is our ability to learn from each other. If I was born in prehistoric times, I'd have as much knowledge as they did. If one of them was born now, they'd have as much as I do. That's why education is so important and, probably, why some people try to suppress others' learning. It gives them an edge to know more. In relation to what you wrote. Now, we have specialization. We don't need everyone to know which mushrooms are edible. Instead, we allocate that task to mushroom experts and they ensure we're eating the right stuff. Or medicine. We don't need to understand it collectively. We just need enough experts to understand it for the rest of us. We are like dwarves sitting on the shoulders of giants. We see more, and things that are more distant, than they did, not because our sight is superior or because we are taller than they, but because they raise us up, and by their great stature add to ours. 12th century theologian John of Salisbury in his treatise on logic, Metalogicon, 1159 AD. Very profound thoughts. Enjoyed reading it. The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity, is almost entirely written on this topic. Well, for starters, the claim that Napoleon was short is just not backed by historical facts. The guy was average height for his time. It's like saying your 5 feet 8 inches friend is a giant because he hangs out with a bunch of kindergartners. Several reasons for the myth. British propaganda. French inches were longer than British inches. He surrounded himself with tall bodyguards. His men affectionately called him Little Corporal. He also didn't shoot the nose off the Sphinx. Historical records show the nose missing long before that. It was Obelix, as anyone who has read Asterix and Cleopatra knows. That binary numbers were first used by Leibniz. Most computer histories make this claim. But there's an existing manuscript page by the English mathematician Thomas Harriot that includes binary numbers and binary multiplication that was written around 1605. 40 years before Leibniz was born. Edit. Spelling. The idea that medieval, early modern people, especially peasants, were filthy, had poor hygiene and never left their villages. Medieval people cleaned themselves and their clothes fairly regularly. They even cleaned their teeth by chewing split twigs. Also, it was fairly common even for peasants to travel to pilgrimage sites on holy days, periods. Yes, I just commented this as a main comment, but they also did not drink beer because the water was dirty. People have known for thousands of years how to keep shit out of their water supply. It's like a cornerstone of civilization. Snobs during the Enlightenment decided to rewrite some things and create the whole Dark Ages. Mythology. Exactly. Also you need clean-ish water to create beer anyway. In towns, certainly it was safer to drink the beer. But most of the population lived rurally anyway. So it didn't matter one way or another. The reason why so many people drank beer is that it's calorific and was easy to make at home. And every homestead did make their own beer. In other words, it provided cheap sustenance for long days of manual labor. Also, as they do now, people like getting drunk. That the pyramids were built by Jewish slaves. The Egyptians were good at record keeping and none of their records say anything about slaves being used for the construction of the pyramids. That's what Big Pyramid wants you to believe. We've rebranded. We're Extreme Point Industries now. For what it's worth, the Old Testament does not say that the pyramids were built by the Jews. The Jews do not believe that the pyramids were built by the Jews. I have no idea where this bit of nonsense comes from. It's not in the Ten Commandments film either. Even though the film took enormous liberties with the biblical account. Not to say that the biblical account is actual history either. Edit. The comment referred to the Jews having built the pyramids and I responded to that. Kindly do not accuse me of saying something I did not say. The biblical account refers to 2 grain storage cities. You may dispute the historical veracity of that or not as you wish. You may dispute the historical veracity of the book of Exodus, the Old Testament or the entire Bible or not as you wish. But please do not say that I stated that the Jews did build the pyramids. I did not. I think it's simply a case that the pyramids are one of the few things everyone knows about Egypt. So somewhere along the lines the stories got mixed up. Everyone knows the pyramids were built by space aliens. Maybe they were Jewish space aliens. We actually prefer the term extraterrestrial. Recent internet experts say they were built by Atlantean survivors. Never did Marie Antoinette say, "Let them eat cake." To be honest, history has demonized that poor child. She was married to a moron, she was in a foreign country, and she had no idea what she was doing. Also another thing about this. The situation is commonly talked about today as though she was being cold and unsympathetic to the people. But the actual intent behind the misquote was to make her look stupid. Not evil. The way it was written was to the idea of her going, "They don't have other food to eat. Well, let them eat the cake then." Not realizing due to her wealth that the common people didn't have cake either. And it wasn't cake, as we would think of it, it was brioche. France had a law that required bakers to serve brioche. Then luxury, food at the price of regular bread. Should there be a bread, food shortage? Also, her whole milkmaid village thing came about because she had nothing to do. She couldn't conceive an heir because her husband couldn't perform. He needed an operation, but he was too scared to get it, and put it off for years. Didn't she also believe that peasants had a more idyllic lifestyle because they weren't burdened by the complexity of court life or politics? I watched a history hit doc about the last days of Marie and it was so sad. She was truly victimized along with her son. It's easy to see her as an elite stomping on the starving poor. But she was really just a product of her upbringing with no idea what she was doing. They targeted her because she was foreign. Here's the film if anyone is interested. https u2.be/w0vb5bgnwqw. Feature equals shared. Not just foreign, but specifically Austrian. Then the longtime rival and arch nemesis of France.